Hello, Saints. I've been looking at John chapter 15, Jesus' story of the vine. This is right after the Last Supper, and he's making his way up to the Mount of Olives there to prepare himself to be handed over for crucifixion. And yet he stops and takes time to teach. Now, Pastor Gary's been preaching on this for some time now, and there's a lot of things we've learned, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about this aspect of love that he brings out in this story, or this teaching. He says there, beginning in verse 9, he says, "Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love." This is an important feature right here where he says about abiding. It's not just staying with Christ, but abiding in his love. This is important for us to understand. Verse 10 and 11, he says, "If you keep my commandments, you'll abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full." And then verse 12, "This is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you." Now, many years ago, I was called to the ministry, and I was at Andrews University. But I was an extreme introvert at the time, and I know that those who know me today might laugh at that, but that's been a long time ago. I didn't feel I had the gifts to be a pastor, and I couldn't sing, and I wasn't really a good speaker. How am I going to do this? And besides, I asked God, don't you have to like people first? And I guess that wasn't a prerequisite. But in it all, after I journeyed out for 22 years and found my way back in, I began to realize that it wasn't about me. I ran away because of unbelief, and I didn't believe that God could fit me for what he had called me for. And this is what we see here, God fitting us. He's not just saying love, but he says, abide in my love. Remember back in verse 9? As we abide in that love, it's his love that generates through us, matures us. Part of our journey is not just about what we are doing in order to commend ourselves to God, but allowing God to work in us. And so with that love abiding in us, we're able to keep his commandments. And this here verse in verse 10, is this line, keep my commandments, is not just a reference to the Ten Commandments, though we might make an argument for that. But the emphasis here is down in verse 12. This is my commandment. This is what he's calling us to keep. What he's calling us to keep is that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Remember in that line, right there in that line, all God's commandments are kept. But it's not about us. It's about him. So in your journey as a Christian, if you're going to have joy as a Christian, which I hope you do, you're going to have to allow God's love to work in you out into the world. It's not an easy thing to do because we get in the way. But God operates through his people, through his church, into the world. So allow this to happen here. Abide with Christ and let that love of his grow in you so that you can fulfill his commandment to love one another just as he has loved us. Go forth, bring the message of love into the world. Don't live a life of defeat, sadness, but joy. Let no one steal your joy. And that joy is the love of Christ in your heart, and we are to share with other people. So share that. Be a blessing.